We even got a case of valve sim steels. Wow. All right, and the last thing we're gonna do is just go through and first we're gonna make sure we get this thing just as clean as we can using some parts cleaner, microfiber. I'm gonna do the same thing to the cylinder head now. All right, so you can see I'm going through multiple sets of these gloves here. If you guys have ever changed a light bulb on your vehicle, it's something not too dissimilar to that. You don't want to make sure you're introducing any grease to the sealing surface here. It's one of these situations where if you want to make sure this thing's sealing correctly, you got to clean the surface as best you can. Now, let's get the cylinder head. All right, there is no way to make this look graceful. I've got the mating surface on the cylinder head all cleaned off, blown off. So now I just need to flip this over and hopefully place it down there without moving that gasket whatsoever. All right, boys and girls, here we go. All right, so definitely the hardest part of the job is over. We got the new head placed on top of the block there. That alignment pin in the corner here initially gave us a little bit of issue, but then clunk, the whole thing locked down. So we're good to go. We're going to double check all our new rubber gaskets going on around the timing case there, because the inner gasket is sandwiched between the head and the block there. So we just want to make sure that's all good to go. And then we've got our digital torque and angle wrench that we're going to go through on these new 10 head bolts to torque down. So it's 30 Newton meters the first pass, and then 90-90 for the second and third passes. And then obviously the biggest part of this job is done. All right, so we got our tray of new head bolts ready to go in here. It just calls for us to wash these down and then lightly oil them before we start dropping them in and torquing them down. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. All right, so here we go. Start getting all these bolts run down. And here's one more than we had before we started this. All right, so this is a 3-step torquing sequence. Like I said before, we use an E12 here. So one suggestion I'd make is go ahead and test your torque wrench out on a different bolt, maybe a strut tower bolt, just to see what kind of torque you're looking to get. You know, that way if you've accidentally done inch pounds instead of Newton meters, you can kind of tell if you've got your torque right or wrong. You know, it'd be terrible if you did like 30 pound-feet and then when you did that second set of 90-degree turns, you could snap a bolt, which would mean that you'd have to pull the head off all over again. So just double check your torque specs and double check that you kind of get a feel for what the torque should feel like as you tighten it down. All right, you can see we got it set for 30 Newton meters here. Let's go ahead and do the first one. But for now, we're going to call it a night. Yeah, it's already nighttime here. And then we're going to come back tomorrow, hit it hard, and hopefully get this thing cranking over. And like I said before, what we're going to do is we're going to do a compression check just to make sure we're starting off on the right foot before we even go through the process of throwing this all back together. We just want to make sure that we've got good compression in those cylinders. So fingers crossed, we're going to sleep good tonight. Until then, see you guys. Check, check, checkity, check, check, check. Let's see it this way. All right, so you can see we got the timing kit in the back here. Oddly enough, I actually bought this for the blue race car to do the Dr. Vanos kick to stop the rattle. But oddly enough, it's perfectly fitting the M44 here. So we got the camshafts torqued in, locked in. We checked all the rockers and everything, make sure they're, you know, hadn't fallen off or whatnot. So now we're going to go through and we're going to get the sprockets on the end of the camshafts, and the TDC pin is also already installed underneath into the flywheel. So we're all ready to lock this thing down at TDC, and fingers crossed here we'll be cranking her over just to make sure nothing's hitting, and then go from there. Alright, so we've got the thermostat timing chain cover all ready to go back on. I did add just a little skim coat of RTV on the backhand side of this, just to make sure that it's going to seal properly. And then we'll go around, throw the last little gasket in the bottom there, and get this plate bolted on, which means we've only got our valve cover left before we can turn the key and at least try to crank this. We've got the fuel system disconnected, so we should know whether or not this thing's worth putting more time into. So let's get this thing on. All right, you can see we really are almost at the moment of truth here. We got just about everything back on. I just flopped the upper intake manifold back on. And just to show you the difference between the cleaned aluminum and then the old aluminum here, we haven't done the intake manifold yet. Again, we're going to wait to see what happens with the car before we pour any more money into it. But we couldn't help with the valve cover. We went through and cleaned that as well, but it's going to be a pretty big contrast when you look at the two here. But let's go ahead and get that valve cover on right now. All right, so you can see we got pretty much everything hooked up. We don't have the EGR on, and we don't have the manifold attached to the down pipe, the mid pipe there. You can see we also got a few more things kicking around here. But I think it's time, guys. What do you guys say? Should we just go full in? We're gonna plug the fuel pump fuse back in. Let's just see. This thing's been off the road here for a couple of weeks, so let's see. Fuel pump, I think it was 12, right? 12? Yeah, 18. All right, so 18's going back in here. This is going to be loud. It's going to be stinky. We don't have coolant in there yet, so we're not going to let it run long. But let's see what happens. No idea what's going to happen. Watch your ears. All right, let's check on that real quick. That's probably just the oil we put in the cylinders there. Let's get the fans going, get everything cleaned out, ready to rock. Whoa. Check, check, checkity, check, check, check. Let's see if this works.